Your person sends you a secret letter. It changes everything. My beloved child, listen carefully. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because this story begins on a quiet autumn evening when the world seemed unusually still. The sky glowed with fading shades of gold, the wind gently stirred the leaves outside, and somewhere, a person sat alone believing that some chapters of life had already come to an end. Days had become weeks, and weeks had become months. They had stopped expecting surprises. They had learned to live with unanswered questions, carrying memories that quietly followed them wherever they went. Yet on this ordinary evening, something unexpected appeared at their front door. It was a small cream-colored envelope with no return address, their name written neatly across the front in familiar handwriting. Their hands trembled as they carefully picked it up. They had not seen that handwriting in a very long time. This is a fictional story about forgiveness, hope, healing, and the courage to speak from the heart. What happened next changed everything. For several long minutes they simply held the envelope without opening it. Countless emotions rushed through their mind. Curiosity battled with fear. Hope wrestled with uncertainty. They wondered whether opening the letter would bring healing or reopen old wounds they had worked so hard to mend. Finally, after taking a slow breath and whispering a quiet prayer for wisdom, they gently broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter filled with carefully chosen words. The first sentence immediately brought tears to their eyes. If this letter has reached you, it means I finally found the courage to say everything I should have said long ago. They paused before reading further. Every word felt sincere. Every sentence carried honesty instead of excuses. There were no attempts to rewrite the past or pretend mistakes had never happened. Instead, the letter spoke openly about regret, personal growth, gratitude, and the lessons learned through time apart. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. The writer admitted that for a long time they had believed silence would protect everyone involved. They thought ignoring difficult conversations would somehow make the pain disappear. Instead, silence had only allowed misunderstandings to grow larger. They wrote about sleepless nights spent reflecting on past decisions. They described how they had begun reading scripture each morning, praying not for an easy life but for wisdom to become a better person. Slowly, they realized that genuine change begins within the heart before it is ever seen in outward actions. The letter continued. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know whether our paths will ever fully cross again. I cannot ask you to forget the past, and I will never ask you to ignore your own healing. I only wanted you to know that your kindness changed my life in ways I never understood until much later. Thank you for every moment of patience, every encouraging word, and every act of grace you showed me, even when I didn't deserve it. Those words rested deeply upon their heart. They noticed something unexpected. Instead of feeling anger, they felt compassion. Instead of reliving old disappointments, they saw evidence that people really can grow through honest reflection, humility, and faith. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another beautiful chapter quietly unfolds. The next morning they carried the letter to a peaceful park where they often prayed. Sitting beneath a large oak tree, they read every line again. This time they noticed details they had missed before. The writer never demanded forgiveness. They never asked for immediate answers. They simply accepted responsibility for their past and expressed sincere gratitude. That humility touched something deep within their soul. As they quietly folded the letter, an elderly woman sitting nearby smiled warmly and said, "Some letters don't arrive to change the past. They arrive to free the future." Those simple words stayed with them long after they left the park. They realized forgiveness is not pretending pain never happened. Forgiveness is choosing not to let yesterday control tomorrow. My beloved child, another unforgettable lesson unfolded during the following weeks. Instead of rushing into emotional decisions, they spent time praying, speaking with trusted friends, and reflecting carefully. They realized that every important relationship deserves honesty, patience, healthy boundaries, and mutual respect. They understood that real reconciliation, when possible, grows through consistent actions rather than emotional promises. And even when reconciliation does not happen, forgiveness can still bring remarkable peace. One evening they opened their own journal and began writing a letter they might never send. Page after page filled with gratitude, memories, forgiveness, and hope. By the time they reached the final sentence, tears quietly rolled down their face. They smiled because they realized they were no longer writing from a wounded heart. They were writing from a healed one. Listen carefully, because another truth is beginning to shine. Sometimes the greatest message another person can give us is not a declaration of love. Sometimes it is an honest apology. Sometimes it is sincere gratitude. Sometimes it is the courage to acknowledge mistakes and encourage one another to continue growing. Those moments remind us that healing becomes possible wherever humility and truth are welcomed. As another peaceful sunset colored the evening sky, they carefully placed the letter back inside its envelope. It would always remind them that people can change, hearts can heal, and difficult seasons can produce wisdom that lasts a lifetime. But above all, it reminded them that their greatest confidence should never rest in another person's words alone. It should rest in God's faithful presence, which had carried them through every chapter of the journey. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to a close, remember this lasting truth. Not every letter changes our destination, but every sincere act of honesty has the power to change a heart. Live with integrity. Speak with kindness. Forgive wisely. Protect your peace. Trust God's guidance more than your fears. Whether relationships are restored or new chapters begin, let your life reflect compassion, humility, patience, and hope. Every sunrise brings another opportunity to grow. Every prayer draws you closer to God's wisdom. Every act of grace becomes a seed that may bless someone for years to come. As the author of your story continues writing each new page, remember that the most beautiful endings often begin with one courageous step toward truth, one sincere prayer, and one heart willing to trust God above everything else. My beloved child, listen carefully, because the story did not end when the letter was folded and placed back inside its envelope. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because the words written on those pages continued echoing through the heart long after the ink had dried. That night, sleep did not come easily. The letter rested quietly on the bedside table while countless memories gently surfaced, not to bring pain, but to reveal how much both lives had changed. For the first time in many years, they were no longer asking, why did this happen? Instead, they quietly wondered, what has God been teaching me through all of this? That single question became the beginning of another extraordinary chapter. What happened next changed everything. As the first light of morning entered the room, they carefully opened the letter once again. This time they noticed something they had completely overlooked before. Tucked inside the final page was a small pressed white lily. It had become delicate with time, yet it remained beautifully preserved. Alongside it was one handwritten sentence. Some things survive because they were protected with patience. Those words settled deep within their heart. They realized that faith, hope, forgiveness, and genuine love all require patience. None of them grow overnight. Like a tiny seed beneath the soil, they develop quietly where only God can see. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. Instead of immediately responding to the letter, they decided to spend several days praying and reflecting. Each morning they sat quietly with their Bible, asking not for quick answers but for wisdom. They read about mercy, humility, forgiveness, and the importance of guarding the heart. Day after day they discovered that God's guidance rarely arrives through panic or pressure. It comes gently to hearts willing to listen patiently. One peaceful afternoon they visited the same lakeside where they had often prayed during difficult seasons. The water reflected the bright blue sky like polished glass. Families laughed nearby, children skipped stones across the lake, and birds glided effortlessly through the cool breeze. Watching those ordinary moments reminded them that life had continued moving forward even during seasons when they believed everything had stopped. God had been faithfully writing new chapters while they were still mourning the old ones. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another remarkable moment quietly unfolded. While preparing to leave, they noticed a weathered wooden bench with words carved into one corner many years before. Grace writes endings that regret never could. They gently traced the letters with their fingertips. Tears filled their eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. They realized the letter had never been sent to make them relive yesterday. It had arrived to help them finally release it. My beloved child, later that evening they opened a fresh page in their journal and began writing words they had never been able to say aloud. Lord, thank you for every lesson hidden inside the waiting. Thank you for showing me that healing is not forgetting, healing is remembering without allowing pain to control my future. Help me continue becoming someone who reflects your kindness no matter what tomorrow brings. As they finished writing, a quiet peace filled the room unlike anything they had experienced before. The burden they had carried for so long suddenly felt lighter. Listen carefully, because another truth is beginning to shine brighter than ever before. They finally understood that some people enter our lives to stay for many years, while others arrive to teach lessons that shape us forever. Neither journey is wasted when it leads us closer to God's wisdom. Every conversation, every farewell, every unexpected reunion, and every season of waiting becomes another brushstroke in the masterpiece He is creating. Several days later they carefully placed the letter inside the journal instead of hiding it away. It was no longer a symbol of unanswered questions. It had become a reminder that honesty, humility, and forgiveness have the power to transform hearts. Whenever fear tried to return, they simply remembered the words written on that final page and chose gratitude instead. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to a close, remember this lasting truth. Some letters arrive to deliver information. Others arrive to bring healing. But the greatest message you will ever receive is found in God's unfailing love, which remains constant through every season of life. Continue walking with humility. Continue choosing forgiveness over bitterness, compassion over anger, and hope over fear. Let every sunrise remind you that God's mercy is new. Let every challenge strengthen your faith rather than weaken it. The author of your story is still writing beautiful chapters filled with purpose, grace, and hope. Trust him with every page, because the story he is writing will always be greater than the one fear tries to tell. My beloved child, listen carefully, because another chapter quietly begins where the last one ended. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because sometimes the smallest discovery carries the greatest meaning. Several days had passed since the mysterious letter arrived, yet its words continued living inside their heart. They no longer read it with tears of sorrow. Instead, every sentence reminded them that people can change, hearts can heal, and God can bring wisdom even from seasons that once seemed filled with disappointment. They carefully placed the letter inside a small wooden box, believing its purpose had been fulfilled. But they had no idea that another unexpected surprise was still waiting. What happened next changed everything. Early one peaceful morning, while placing the wooden box back on the shelf, something quietly slipped from between the folded pages of the letter. It floated gently to the floor like a single autumn leaf. Curious, they bent down and picked it up. It was a tiny photograph, slightly faded with age. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were only a few simple words. "Thank you for believing in the person I was trying to become." They stood completely still. Those few words touched their heart more deeply than pages of explanation ever could. There were no dramatic promises. No impossible guarantees. Only sincere gratitude. In that moment they realized that sometimes the greatest gift we give another person is believing they can grow beyond their mistakes. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. That afternoon they walked to a quiet chapel where sunlight streamed through beautiful stained glass windows. Sitting alone in the peaceful silence, they held both the letter and the small photograph in their hands. Closing their eyes, they prayed softly. "Father, thank you for reminding me that your grace changes lives one step at a time. Help me never become bitter because of yesterday. Help me continue believing that you are always working in hearts, even when I cannot see it. Teach me to love wisely, forgive sincerely, and trust completely." As they finished praying, they felt no pressure to rush toward any decision. Instead, they experienced something far more valuable: peace. They understood that God's guidance is never driven by panic. His wisdom always leads with calmness. My beloved child, another unforgettable lesson quietly unfolded during the following week. While volunteering at the community center, they met a young woman struggling with disappointment after a friendship had ended. She quietly asked, "How do you stop carrying the past?" They smiled gently before answering. "You don't erase the past. You allow God to transform what it teaches you." The young woman looked surprised. They continued, "Scars remind us that healing happened. They don't have to remind us that we're still wounded." Those simple words encouraged not only the young woman but also their own heart. Sometimes the advice we offer others is the very truth God is still teaching us. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another beautiful chapter quietly begins. Later that evening they returned home and opened the journal once more. Instead of writing about unanswered questions, they wrote about unexpected blessings that had arrived throughout the journey. The mysterious letter. The wisdom shared by strangers. The peaceful morning spent in prayer. The forgiveness they had discovered. The friendships that had grown stronger. The quiet confidence replacing fear. Page after page became filled with gratitude instead of uncertainty. As they finished writing, they noticed something remarkable. Months earlier they had believed they were waiting for another person to change their life. Now they realized God had already been changing their life every single day. Listen carefully, because it protects peace. It chooses patience. Most importantly, it reflects the same grace God continually offers every one of us. Whether relationships are restored or new paths unfold, a heart shaped by grace remains free from fear. One quiet evening they climbed the familiar hill overlooking the valley where so much of this journey had unfolded. The setting sun painted the clouds with brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Looking across the landscape, they smiled with deep gratitude. The questions that once kept them awake had become prayers. The fears that once controlled them had become lessons. The waiting that once felt endless had become preparation. Nothing had been wasted. Every chapter had quietly shaped them into someone stronger, kinder, wiser, and more compassionate than they had ever imagined possible. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to its close, remember this forever. Life is rarely transformed by one dramatic moment alone. More often, it is changed through countless quiet moments when faith is chosen over fear, forgiveness over resentment, and hope over despair. Continue trusting God's timing even when the road ahead remains hidden. Continue planting seeds of kindness even when you cannot yet see the harvest. Continue speaking words that heal instead of words that wound. Let your life become a living letter that others can read, a testimony of compassion, humility, courage, and unwavering faith. As the author of your story continues writing each new page, know that every sunrise carries fresh mercy, every challenge carries hidden purpose, and every faithful step brings you closer to the beautiful future He is preparing. The finest chapters have not been left behind. They are still waiting ahead, one grace-filled day at a time. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this chapter begins on a peaceful morning unlike any that came before it. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because the journey you have witnessed is about to reveal one more beautiful lesson. Several weeks had passed since the mysterious letter arrived. The envelope was no longer hidden away out of fear. It rested safely inside the journal that had become a witness to every prayer, every lesson, every tear, and every victory. The person in this story no longer opened it searching for answers. They opened it as a reminder that healing is possible, forgiveness is powerful, and God can use even the most unexpected moments to reshape a human heart. What happened next changed everything. As the first rays of sunlight entered the room, they noticed something they had never seen before. A tiny piece of folded paper had remained tucked inside the back cover of the journal. It was so carefully hidden that it had escaped their attention for weeks. Their heart began to race, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity. Slowly unfolding the paper, they found only one short sentence written in the same familiar handwriting. If you are reading this today, I hope you have already discovered that your greatest strength was never my presence, it was always God's faithfulness. They sat in complete silence. For several long moments they simply stared at those words. Then tears slowly filled their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of regret. But tears of gratitude. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. They realized that throughout the entire journey they had believed the greatest treasure was the letter itself. Yet the true treasure had been the transformation taking place inside their own heart. The letter had simply opened the door. God had done the healing. God had restored the peace. God had patiently replaced fear with faith and confusion with wisdom. That afternoon they decided to visit the small hillside where they had first begun praying months earlier. Everything looked familiar, yet somehow completely new. The same trees stood quietly in the breeze. The same birds sang joyful songs. The same winding path stretched before them. But the person walking that path had completely changed. Months earlier they had climbed the hill carrying questions. Today they climbed carrying gratitude. Months earlier they had searched for signs. Today they simply thanked God for His constant presence. My beloved child, another unforgettable lesson quietly unfolded while they stood overlooking the valley. An elderly shepherd slowly guided his flock across the hillside below. None of the sheep rushed ahead. None wandered far away. They simply followed the shepherd's voice with quiet trust. Watching that peaceful scene, they smiled. They finally understood why Scripture so often speaks about the shepherd leading his people. Faith is not about knowing every turn in the road. Faith is about trusting the one who already knows the destination. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another beautiful moment is waiting. That evening they returned home and carefully placed the letter inside a small wooden frame instead of hiding it away forever. They removed every name and every personal detail, leaving only the sentence that had touched them most deeply. Your greatest strength was always God's faithfulness. It became more than a memory. It became a daily reminder. Whenever difficult days returned. Whenever fear tried to whisper old lies. Whenever uncertainty knocked at the door. They looked at those words and remembered everything God had already carried them through. Listen carefully, because another truth is beginning to shine brighter than ever before. They discovered that every chapter of life prepares us for another opportunity to become more compassionate, more patient, more forgiving, and more grateful. The greatest victories are often invisible. They happen inside the heart long before anyone else notices them. Weeks later, while volunteering once again at the community center, someone quietly asked them, "What changed your life?" They smiled warmly before answering. It wasn't one letter. It wasn't one conversation. It wasn't one miracle. It was choosing every day to trust God a little more than I trusted my fears. Those simple words encouraged everyone sitting nearby. Because they knew they were true. Then, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, they walked outside and looked toward the evening sky one final time. The stars began appearing one by one, just as they had throughout every chapter of this journey. They realized those stars had always been there, even during cloudy nights when they could not be seen. God's faithfulness is like that. Sometimes hidden from our view. Never absent. Always present. Always guiding. Always loving. Always working for good in ways we may only understand much later. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to a close, remember this lasting truth. Never allow temporary seasons to define your forever. Every disappointment can become a lesson. Every delay can become preparation. Every act of forgiveness can become freedom. Every sincere prayer brings you closer to the heart of God. Continue walking forward with courage instead of fear. Continue loving even when it feels difficult. Continue choosing kindness when bitterness seems easier. Continue trusting God's wisdom above your own understanding. The greatest letter you will ever receive is not written on paper. It is written every day through His grace, His mercy, His word, and His unfailing love. As the author of your story continues writing each new page, know with confidence that no chapter is wasted, no prayer is forgotten, and no faithful step is ever taken alone. The story is still unfolding, and the most beautiful pages are still waiting to be written, one hopeful sunrise at a time. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this chapter begins on a peaceful night when the moon hung quietly above the earth, bathing everything in gentle silver light. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because sometimes the greatest message is not found in the words we receive, but in the life we choose to live afterward. Many months had passed since the mysterious letter first arrived. The envelope had become part of the journal that rested safely on a small wooden table beside the window. Yet something remarkable had happened. The person in this story no longer reached for the letter every day. They no longer needed it to remind them of hope. The lessons written inside those pages had already become part of who they were. God had quietly written those same lessons upon their heart. What happened next changed everything. As dawn slowly approached, they woke before the sunrise and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The world was silent except for the gentle songs of birds welcoming a brand new day. Looking across the distant hills, they remembered the person they had once been. They remembered the sleepless nights, the endless questions, and the fear that tomorrow might never become brighter than yesterday. Smiling softly, they whispered, "Father, thank you for carrying me through every chapter one thought would break me. You never left, even when I couldn't recognize your hand." Listen carefully, because this changes everything. Later that morning they traveled to a quiet village where an elderly craftsman spent his days restoring broken clocks. Curious, they entered the small workshop filled with ticking sounds from every direction. Some clocks were polished and shining. Others were still taken apart, their tiny gears carefully arranged across the workbench. The craftsman smiled warmly and said, "Every clock arrives here believing its story has ended. My job is simply to restore what still has purpose." Those words settled deep within their heart. They realized that God often works in the same patient way. He does not throw away broken hearts. He restores them. He does not abandon unfinished stories. He continues writing them. He does not measure people by their failures. He sees the beautiful future they are still capable of becoming. My beloved child, another unforgettable lesson quietly unfolded that afternoon. While walking home, they noticed a little girl carefully helping her younger brother learn how to ride a bicycle. Again and again he lost his balance. Again and again he fell. Yet every single time she smiled, helped him stand, brushed the dust from his clothes, and encouraged him to try once more. Watching from a distance, they suddenly understood something beautiful. Love does not keep score of failures. Love patiently celebrates every small step forward. They smiled because they realized this is how God had been leading them all along. Every time they stumbled, He offered another opportunity. Every time fear returned, He whispered hope. Every time disappointment appeared, He quietly reminded them that His grace was greater. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another beautiful chapter quietly begins. That evening they opened the journal one final time and read every page from beginning to end. The first chapters spoke of uncertainty. The middle chapters revealed healing. The newest pages overflowed with gratitude. Then they noticed something remarkable. The mysterious letter that had once seemed like the center of the story had gradually become only one chapter among many. The true story had never been about receiving a letter. It had always been about becoming the person God was gently shaping through every experience. Listen carefully, because another truth is beginning to shine brighter than ever before. They realized that the greatest miracle had not been discovering hidden words written by another person. The greatest miracle had been discovering peace that no circumstance could take away. Whether life brought joyful reunions, unexpected opportunities, quiet seasons, or difficult challenges, their confidence no longer depended upon changing situations. It rested completely in God's faithful character. As another peaceful sunset colored the evening sky, they climbed the familiar hill where their journey had begun many months earlier. Looking across the valley, they noticed children laughing, families walking together, neighbors helping one another, and countless ordinary moments unfolding beneath the golden light. They smiled, because they finally understood. Life itself had always been the miracle. Every sunrise, every friendship, every prayer, every act of forgiveness, every opportunity to love, every quiet moment spent walking with God. Those had been the greatest gifts all along. They folded their hands one final time and quietly prayed. Heavenly Father, thank you for every lesson hidden inside this journey. Thank you for teaching me that true peace comes from trusting you, not from controlling tomorrow. Help me continue encouraging those who have lost hope, comforting those who feel forgotten, forgiving as you have forgiven me, and walking each day with humility and gratitude. Let my life become a living testimony of your love so that others may find hope whenever they see the light you have placed within me. Amen. A gentle breeze moved across the hillside as the first evening stars appeared above the quiet earth. Their journey had not truly ended. It had simply become a new beginning. A beginning marked not by fear, but by faith. Not by uncertainty, but by peace. Not by regret, but by gratitude. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to its close, remember this forever. Every life tells a story. Make yours a story of compassion instead of resentment, courage instead of fear, forgiveness instead of bitterness, and hope instead of despair. Continue trusting God's timing when the road ahead seems uncertain. Continue serving others with a joyful heart. Continue planting seeds of kindness wherever you go. Let every sunrise remind you that mercy is new. Let every sunset remind you that God's faithfulness carried you through another day. And as the author of your life continues writing each new chapter, know this with confidence: the most powerful letter ever written is not one delivered by human hands. It is the message of God's enduring love, written upon every heart willing to trust Him. Walk forward with confidence, because the finest chapters of your story are not behind you. They are still waiting ahead, shining with grace, purpose, and everlasting hope. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this chapter begins on a night that seemed ordinary to everyone else, but heaven was quietly preparing a moment that would remain in one heart forever. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because what is about to happen is not about changing the past, it is about discovering the purpose that was hidden inside it all along. The person in this story had almost stopped expecting unexpected moments. Life had become peaceful, their faith had grown stronger, and they had finally learned to leave tomorrow in God's hands. Yet on this particular evening, as rain gently tapped against the window, someone knocked softly at the front door. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. It was simply one quiet knock that would begin another unforgettable chapter. What happened next changed everything. When they slowly opened the door, no one was standing there. The street was empty, the rain continued falling, and the evening breeze carried only silence. Confused, they looked around before noticing a small wooden box resting neatly on the doorstep. It was wrapped with a simple white ribbon. There was no name. No address. No explanation. Only one handwritten sentence rested on top. Some gifts are opened with your hands. Others are opened with your heart. They carried the box inside and placed it gently on the table. Instead of opening it immediately, they folded their hands and prayed. Father, if this moment has something to teach me, help me receive it with wisdom instead of curiosity. Only after praying did they slowly untie the ribbon. Inside the box were 3 simple objects. A tiny wooden cross. A dried olive branch. And an old pocket watch that had stopped moving years ago. Beneath them rested another folded note. Time stopped teaching me when I lived only for yesterday. It began again when I trusted God with tomorrow. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. Those words settled deep inside their soul. Holding the silent pocket watch in their hand, they realized how many years they had spent wishing they could turn time backwards. They wanted different conversations. Different choices. Different endings. But God had never asked them to live in yesterday. He had invited them to live faithfully today. The wooden cross reminded them of grace. The olive branch reminded them of peace. The watch reminded them that every new moment is a gift. My beloved child, another unforgettable lesson quietly unfolded the following morning. They carried the small box to the hill where so much of their journey had begun. Sitting beneath the old tree, they carefully placed each object beside them and began thanking God. Not only for the joyful chapters but also for every difficult season that had strengthened their faith. As they prayed, an elderly traveler happened to walk by. He smiled kindly and asked, "May I sit here for a moment?" They nodded. After a few minutes of peaceful silence, the traveler quietly said, "You know, people spend their whole lives trying to discover where happiness is hidden." They looked at him with curiosity. He continued, "But happiness is rarely hidden in tomorrow. It is usually waiting inside today's gratitude." Without another word, he stood, smiled warmly, and continued down the path. Those few sentences remained in their heart long after he disappeared beyond the hill. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because another beautiful moment is waiting. That evening they returned home and opened the journal once again. On a fresh page they wrote, "Today I stopped asking God to rewrite my past. Instead, I thanked Him for writing a future filled with hope. I no longer fear the chapters one cannot see because I finally know the author of the story." As they finished writing, something inside them became completely still. Not empty. Not lonely. Simply peaceful. The kind of peace that cannot be purchased. The kind of peace that remains even when life becomes uncertain. Listen carefully, because another truth is beginning to shine brighter than ever before. They realized that the greatest gift had never been the mysterious letter. It had never been the wooden box. It had never been the hidden messages. The greatest gift had always been the person God was quietly transforming them into through every experience. A heart that forgave more quickly. A spirit that trusted more deeply. A life that loved more generously. A soul that no longer feared tomorrow. As night covered the sky once again, they stepped outside and looked toward the countless stars. They smiled. Not because every dream had already come true, but because they finally understood that God's presence had been the answer they were searching for all along. Every prayer, every tear, every delay, every unexpected blessing, every quiet sunrise, every peaceful sunset. Every single chapter had gently carried them closer to Him. My beloved child, before this chapter comes to its close, remember this forever. The most valuable treasures in life are not the ones you can hold in your hands, they are the ones God quietly plants within your heart. Faith that refuses to give up. Hope that continues through difficult seasons. Love that chooses forgiveness over bitterness. Peace that remains steady when circumstances change. Carry those treasures wherever you go. Let your life become a light for those walking through darkness. Encourage the discouraged. Lift the broken-hearted. Trust God's wisdom when your own understanding falls short. And as the author of your life continues writing every beautiful page, never forget this. The greatest miracle is not that your story still has more chapters. The greatest miracle is that every chapter is being written by hands that never fail, guided by perfect love, endless mercy, and a hope that shines brighter than every sunrise yet to come. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this is the final chapter of this unforgettable story. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because every tear, every prayer, every lesson, every quiet sunrise, and every unexpected moment has been leading here. The journey that began with uncertainty has become a journey of hope. The mysterious letter, the small wooden box, the quiet conversations, and every lesson learned along the way were never meant to make the future predictable. They were meant to help one heart discover a deeper truth. That real peace is not found in knowing everything that will happen tomorrow, but in trusting God one faithful step at a time. The final morning arrived wrapped in golden light. As the sun slowly climbed above the horizon, they stood on the same hill where so much of their story had unfolded. The gentle wind moved through the trees exactly as it had on the first day, yet everything felt different. Looking across the valley, they smiled, remembering every chapter of the journey. There had been moments of fear, moments of waiting, moments of unexpected joy, and moments when hope seemed impossible to hold. Yet through every season, God had quietly been shaping a stronger, kinder, and more faithful heart. Listen carefully, because this changes everything. They reached into their bag and removed the old letter one final time. Instead of reading it again, they folded it carefully, placed it inside the journal, and gently closed the cover. They realized they no longer needed to revisit those words. The message had already become part of their life. Forgiveness had replaced resentment. Gratitude had replaced regret. Faith had replaced fear. The story written on those pages was now written within their own heart. As they began walking down the hillside, they met many of the people who had quietly become part of their journey. The elderly gardener smiled beside a garden now overflowing with colorful flowers. The young artist proudly finished another beautiful painting. The elderly woman who had shared so much wisdom welcomed neighbors with warmth and kindness. Children laughed as they played beneath the trees, reminding everyone that joy often lives in life's simplest moments. Looking around, they realized something extraordinary. Every act of love they had witnessed had continued growing, touching lives far beyond what anyone could measure. My beloved child, another beautiful moment quietly unfolded before sunset. They returned home and placed the journal, the letter, the tiny wooden cross, the olive branch, and the old pocket watch inside a small wooden chest. Closing the lid did not mean forgetting the past. It meant honoring every lesson while choosing to keep moving forward. Some memories are not meant to hold us back. They are meant to remind us how faithfully God carried us through the hardest seasons of life. That evening, family and friends gathered together for a simple meal. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic celebrations, only laughter, gratitude, shared stories, and quiet prayers around the table. Looking into the smiling faces around them, they finally understood that life's greatest treasures are not possessions or perfect circumstances. They are faith that grows stronger through hardship, hope that survives disappointment, friendships built on kindness, and a heart willing to love without fear. As night covered the sky, they stepped outside one final time. Thousands of stars sparkled above them just as they had throughout every chapter of the journey. Folding their hands, they whispered their final prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for every lesson hidden inside this story. Thank you for turning my fears into faith, my waiting into wisdom, and my brokenness into compassion. Help me continue living with humility, serving others with joy, forgiving quickly, speaking kindly, and trusting you completely. Let my life become a light that encourages others to keep walking with hope, no matter how difficult the road may seem. Amen. The stars continued shining. The night remained quiet. Yet everything had changed within them. They realized that the greatest miracle had never been receiving a mysterious letter or discovering hidden messages. The greatest miracle had been allowing God to transform an ordinary heart into one filled with courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and enduring hope. My beloved child, as this story reaches its final page, remember this forever. Every ending can become the beginning of something beautiful when it is placed in God's hands. Do not let fear write the next chapter of your life. Let faith guide your steps. Do not allow yesterday's disappointments to steal tomorrow's hope. Walk forward with kindness, humility, patience, and love. Encourage those who are weary. Forgive those who have hurt you wisely. Celebrate every ordinary blessing. Trust God's wisdom when your own understanding is limited. The author of your life is still writing a story filled with grace, purpose, and hope. And as the first light of another sunrise appears beyond the horizon, remember that every new day is a fresh opportunity to live with courage, love generously, serve faithfully, and reflect the light of Christ wherever you go. The final page of this story closes with peace, but the greatest adventure begins now, one faithful step, one sincere prayer, and one hopeful sunrise at a time.